She had 10 seconds. 10 seconds to keep walking like everyone else did. 10 seconds to look away like her sister did. 10 seconds to tell herself it was not her problem, like every single person on that street had already decided. But something stopped her. Not a voice, not a sign, not a reason she could explain to anyone who asked. Just a feeling, the kind that sits in the center of your chest and refuses to move until you listen to it. She stopped. She turned. She looked at the man sitting alone against that wall, torn clothes, empty hands, eyes fixed on the ground, like someone who had forgotten there was anything worth looking at. And she walked toward him. In those 10 seconds, she did not know she was about to lose her family. She did not know she was about to be thrown out of her own home. She did not know that the homeless stranger she was walking toward was the most dangerous kind of secret a person can keep, the kind that changes absolutely everything. Welcome to Fusion Narratives. Stay with me, because what happens next you will not see coming. But first, like this right now if you believe good people still exist in this world. Comment below, are you one of them? And drop your city. I want to see how far kindness travels. Now, let's begin. Her name was Daisy, 26 years old, bank teller, 6 days a week. The kind of woman who sets her alarm 15 minutes earlier than she needs to, just to make sure she is never late. Not because anyone notices when she is on time, but because she notices, because that is who she is. She had grown up in a house that was big enough to feel small in. Her mother, Mama Agnes, was a proud woman, the kind of proud that has nothing to do with achievement and everything to do with appearance. What the neighbors thought, what the family name meant, what kind of man her daughters would marry. These were the things that mattered in that house, and by those measures, Daisy had always fallen slightly short. Scene, morning, the house, 6:15 a.m. She was the first one up, every morning. She made tea she didn't drink because she was already running through her mental list. Bills, groceries, her mother's medication, the water bill that was 2 weeks late. She worked the numbers in her head the way she worked the numbers at the bank, carefully, honestly, with no room for error, because there was no room for error. Her father had passed 3 years ago, and with him went the one person in the house who had ever looked at Daisy and seen something worth looking at. Scene, breakfast table. Juliet came down at 8. Daisy's younger sister, by 11 months, but a different species entirely. Juliet moved through life with the confidence of someone who had decided that the world owed her something and was simply waiting for the delivery. She was beautiful. She knew it. She used it the way some people use a weapon, casually, without thinking too much about the damage. "You made tea?" Juliet said, sitting down without looking up from her phone. "Mine's too cold." Daisy took the cup, refilled it with hot water, set it back, said nothing. Daniel, Juliet's twin, 2 years post-graduation, 0 days employed, appeared in the doorway in yesterday's clothes. "Is there food?" "There's bread, and eggs if you make them." "I don't make eggs." "Then there's bread." Daniel looked at her with the expression of a man who found the concept of cooking personally offensive. He took the bread, sat down, started scrolling his phone. Mama Agnes came down at 9. She looked at Daisy like she always did, like she was a piece of furniture she wasn't sure she still wanted.
"You're leaving late," she said. "I leave at 8:30, Mama. Same time every day." "The Adeyemi family will be at the community event this Saturday," Mama Agnes said, not responding to Daisy, but turning to Juliet. "I know, Mama." Juliet's face lit up. "You will wear the gold dress. I've already spoken to the tailor." "Of course." Daisy quietly picked up her bag. Nobody said goodbye. She walked to work the long way. Not because it was faster, because it was quieter. 20 minutes of streets that didn't require anything from her. She passed the same corner shop every morning, the same old woman selling groundnuts, the same two boys arguing about football outside the electronics store. The world was full of people going about their lives, and for 20 minutes, Daisy was just one of them. Nobody's disappointment, nobody's comparison, nobody's project. Just a woman walking to work in the morning. The bank, 8:59 a.m. She was good at her job. This was not something anyone at home mentioned, but it was true. Her manager, Mr. Osai, had told her twice in 3 years that she was reliable and sharp. For Mr. Osai, a man who communicated mostly in grunts and occasional nods, this was high praise. She knew the customers by their transaction habits. Mrs. Bankole, withdrawals every Thursday, always exact amounts, always slightly nervous. Mr. Taiwo, deposits in cash every Monday, always counting twice, always checking her work. Young couple, joint account, always a little short, always a little hopeful. Daisy knew them all. She remembered them. She cared about them in the small, daily way that costs nothing, but means everything. The extra second to count the change correctly. The smile that isn't performed. The "have a good day" that actually means it. Nobody gave her an award for this. She didn't expect one. End of shift, 5:30 p.m. She always took the long way home, past the market, down through the side streets where the evening felt softer than the main road. It was on one of these evenings, a Tuesday, warm, the sun going sideways, that she turned a corner and stopped walking.
He was sitting against a wall, not begging, not sleeping, not asking for anything from anyone, just sitting, back against the brick, knees bent, arms resting on his knees, head slightly bowed. His clothes were torn at the shoulder and hem. His shoes had no laces. There was dust on his face from a long day of doing nothing in a very hot sun. But his hands were still, not the restless still of someone who can't sleep, the deliberate still of someone who had decided to stop moving and simply wait. Daisy had passed beggars before. She usually gave, when she could, a small note, quick, without drama, and kept moving. But this man was not asking. And something about that, the not asking, was what made her stop. She stood 5 feet away, watching. He didn't look up. "Are you okay?" she asked. He looked up, and she almost stepped back because his eyes were completely unexpected, not desperate, not hollow, not the eyes of a man who had given up anything. Sharp, clear, quietly, absolutely paying attention, like someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment and was now taking careful note of everything about it. "I'm all right," he said. "Thank you for asking." His voice was soft, educated, another surprise. Daisy reached into her bag. "Please." "You don't have to," he started. "I know," she said simply. "That's why I'm doing it." She pressed the money into his hand. "Please eat something." He looked down at the notes, then back at her. And that look, careful, attentive, almost studying her, stayed in her mind long after she walked away. Home, that evening,
Juliet had seen her. Of course she had. She had been at a shop 2 streets over with a friend and had looked up at exactly the right moment to witness Daisy crouching beside a beggar on the public street. By the time Daisy got through the front door, Juliet had already told the story twice, once to Daniel and once to Mama Agnes, with full dramatic effect. In the middle of the street, Mama, just bent down like she was her personal assistant. Daniel laughed. Mama Agnes looked at Daisy the way she always looked at things she found embarrassing. Is it true? I gave him some money. He looked hungry. Daisy, her mother's voice, patient, tired, already disappointed. You can't save everyone. I wasn't trying to save everyone. I was trying to help one person. Same thing. It's not the same thing. Juliet rolled her eyes. She'll probably want to invite him to dinner next. Daniel, or marry him. Juliet burst out laughing. Mrs. Beggar, imagine the wedding. Daisy said nothing. She was used to this. She picked up her bag, went upstairs, closed her door, and sat on her bed, thinking about careful, attentive eyes that did not look like the eyes of a man who had given up anything. Narrator, quiet. She would see him again. She knew it with the same certainty she knew her alarm would go off at 6. Some things are simply coming towards you, whether you know it or not.
She saw him again 4 days later. He was carrying goods for a market woman, struggling under the weight, sweat on his forehead, not complaining. Daisy fell into step beside him. Let me take one side. He turned, recognized her immediately. That careful look again. You don't have to. I know, she said again. You'll notice I say that a lot. He almost smiled. I've noticed. They carried the goods together, set them down at the market woman's stall. The woman thanked them both, pressing a small note into David's hand, and turned back to her work. They stood on the pavement. I'm Daisy, she said. I know, your sister used your name that day. I have a good memory. Daisy laughed, genuine, surprised. She wasn't exactly being kind when she said it. No, he agreed. But you were. His name was David. And over the weeks that followed, 3, then 4, then 6, Daisy kept finding him. Or he kept finding her. She was never entirely sure which it was. They had a spot. Not a fancy spot. A bench near a roadside kiosk that sold cold drinks and had a television mounted outside that nobody watched. They would sit there in the early evening, Daisy on her way home, David between whatever small work he had found, and they would talk. The kind of talking that doesn't happen between people who are performing for each other. Real talking. The kind with pauses that don't need filling. David told her he was an orphan, that he had lived in a children's home until he was 18, that since then he had worked, carried goods, cleaned spaces, loaded trucks, anything available, nothing lasting. Some days I don't eat, he said once. Not dramatically, just factually, the way you described the weather. Today? Daisy asked. He looked at her sideways. Today you brought food. She had. A container from the restaurant near the bank, rice and stew, more than she could finish anyway, or so she had told herself. He ate it with dignity, without rushing, without making her feel she had done anything remarkable. Why do you help people? He asked once, not accusingly, genuinely curious. Daisy thought about it. Because I know what it feels like to be in a room full of people and feel invisible, she said. I don't like that feeling, so I try not to make others feel it. David was quiet for a moment. You feel invisible at home. It wasn't a question. Daisy looked at the street. Sometimes. He shouldn't, he said. She turned to look at him.
He was looking at her with that careful, attentive gaze, the one that had startled her the very first day. "You are the most visible person I have ever met," he said quietly. "The problem is that the people around you have chosen not to see." Daisy looked away, because if she kept looking at him, she was going to say something she wasn't ready to say yet.
Juliet had been watching. Daisy had known it was coming, the way you know a headache is coming before it arrives. The moment she stepped through the door that Thursday evening, the entire family was in the living room, arranged, waiting, like a tribunal that had agreed on the verdict before anyone spoke. Mama Agnes. "Sit down, Daisy." Daisy sat. Juliet, arms folded. "You have been spending time with that beggar, not just giving money, sitting with him, talking to him like he is your friend." "He is my friend." The room went tight. "Daniel, you are embarrassing this family." "I am sitting on a bench talking to a person. How is that embarrassing?" "Because of who he is, because of what people will say, because your sister is trying to build a future with the Adeyemi family, the most important city in this city, and you are running around with someone who sleeps on streets." Daisy felt something harden in her chest. "Juliet's boyfriend Tom deals in illegal things. Everyone in this neighborhood knows it. You have never said a word. Daniel has not worked in 2 years. You defend him every time. But I have one friend, one person I talk to who happens to be poor, and suddenly I'm the problem?" The silence was sharp. Mama Agnes stood up slowly. "That is different." "How? How is it different?" "Because Tom and Daniel, whatever their faults, will not destroy this family's reputation. What you're doing will." Daisy looked at her mother for a long moment. "What exactly do you think I am doing, Mama?" Mama Agnes met her eyes. "I think you are falling in love with a beggar, and I think if you continue, I will have no choice but to ask you to leave this house." The room was completely still. Daisy said nothing. She stood up, went to her room, and lay on her bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Not afraid, something worse than afraid. Certain. Certain of exactly what was coming, and certain, in the very center of herself, that she was not going to change course. 2 weeks later. The bench. Early evening. The sky doing something complicated with orange and purple. David said, "I need to tell you something." His voice was different, carefully different. Daisy looked at him. "You looked serious." "I am serious." A pause. "I want to marry you." Daisy did not react immediately. She sat with it, the way you sit with a sentence that is too large to process standing up. "David," I know what you're going to say. "I have nothing. No house, no savings, no name that opens doors. The world would say I have nothing to offer. But I can offer you something the world doesn't sell. I see you, Daisy. Not what you do for people, not what your family says you should be. I see you. And I want to spend every day making sure you never feel invisible again." Daisy looked at the street. She thought about her mother, about Juliet's laugh, about Daniel's smirk, about every morning she had woken up in that house and been invisible. She thought about every evening on this bench, the only place in her entire life that she had felt completely, honestly seen. "Yes," she said. David was very still. "Yes?" "Yes," she said, more certain. "Yes, David, yes."
He closed his eyes for one full second. When he opened them, that careful, attentive look was still there, but now there was something else in it, something that looked almost like relief, and something else, something she couldn't name, something that felt like the ending of something she didn't know had been in progress. Home, that same evening. She told them. She should have waited, should have found a better moment, but she had never been good at carrying things in secret, and the yes inside her was too large to hold. She sat them all down, told them clearly, calmly, exactly what she had decided, that she was going to marry David, that she knew what they would say, that she had decided it didn't matter. Mama Agnes did not shout. That was the frightening part. She had expected shouting, crying, drama. Instead, her mother stood up very slowly, walked to the front door, opened it, and said 2 words, "Get out." "Mama," I said, "get out. Tonight, with your things, now." Juliet was standing in the corner, arms crossed, expression closed. Daniel looked at the floor, the only sign that even he had not expected this. Daisy looked at her mother, at the woman who had raised her, fed her, kept her, and had never once chosen her. She went to her room. She packed one bag, 26 years of life compressed into one bag because that was how little space she had been given. She came back downstairs, stopped in front of her mother. "I love you, Mama," she said, quietly, without wavering, even now. Mama Agnes said nothing, did not look at her. Daisy walked out. The door closed behind her. She stood on the street in the evening air, one bag. And then she called David. He answered on the first ring. "I said yes," she told him. "I also just got thrown out of my house." A pause. "I know," he said. "I was watching." "How were you—" "Come to the corner of Adeyemi Boulevard," he said. "There's a car waiting." "A car? Please, Daisy, just come." She walked, and at the corner was a black car, sleek, new, with a driver in uniform who opened the door before she finished crossing the street.
She stopped walking, looked at the car, looked at David, still in his torn clothes, but standing differently than she had ever seen him stand, with a stillness that was not exhaustion, with a steadiness that was not poverty, with an ease that did not belong to a man with nothing. "David," she said slowly, "whose car is this?" "Mine," he said. She stared at him. "What?" He held her gaze, completely steady. "My name is David Adeyemi. My father is Chief Raymond Adeyemi. My family owns Adeyemi Industries, the largest company in this region. I am worth more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes, and I have been living on those streets for 6 weeks deliberately to find one specific thing." Daisy stood very still. The street noise continued. A car horn somewhere, a child laughing, the kiosk television playing something nobody watched. The world kept moving. Daisy did not. "You're the Adeyemi heir," she said slowly. "Yes. The family Juliet has spent 3 years planning to marry into." A pause. "Yes." "And the torn clothes, the street corners, the story about the orphanage, the struggling, the not eating, all of it was real," he said. "The conditions were real. I lived them fully. I went without. I slept outside twice. I worked the loads. I felt every part of it. The only thing I kept was the reason I was there." She looked at him. "Which was?" David stepped closer.
My parents wanted to arrange my marriage to someone they chose, someone from the right family, the right background, the right bank balance. And I told them, I told my father directly that I would only marry someone who was kind when there was nothing to gain from being kind. Someone who would stop for a man on a street corner, not because of what he had, but because of what he was, a human being. I went onto those streets with nothing. I stayed for 6 weeks. I let hundreds of people walk past me. Rich, poor, educated, simple, kind-looking, harsh-looking. Not one person stopped. Until you. Daisy sat down. Right there, on the pavement, with her one bag beside her, because her legs had simply decided they were done with standing. David sat beside her, not in the car, not at a distance, right beside her, on the pavement, in his torn clothes. "You lied to me," she said. "Yes, I did. The whole time, everything we talked about, every evening on that bench. The feelings were never lies. The conversations were never lies. What I told you about wanting something real, about being tired of being seen as money, that was never a lie. The only lie was what I was wearing and where I slept." Daisy looked at her hands. The hands that had given him money she could barely spare. The hands that had carried market goods beside him on a Wednesday evening. "You watched me, while you were being watched by me." "Yes. And when I said yes, when I told my mother and she threw me out, you already knew what would happen." He was quiet for a moment. "I knew it was possible. I didn't know it would happen so fast. I'm sorry, Daisy. If I could have—" "Don't," she said. He stopped. She was quiet for a long time. The evening settled around them. Then she said, "Did your parents know specifically about me?" "My father knew I was looking. He didn't know I had found someone until I called from this street corner 2 weeks ago. The night you asked me about what I wanted from life." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Take me to meet them," she said. David looked at her. "Now?" "Now," she said, "before I change my mind about any of this." The ghost of a smile. "The car is right there." She looked at it. "I know," she said. "It's very clean for someone who lives on streets." And for the first time, fully, genuinely, without performance, David Adeyemi laughed.
The Adeyemi estate was everything Mama Agnes had spent 3 years dreaming about for her other daughter. And Daisy, who had just been thrown out of her home with one bag, walked through those gates with her chin level and her hands steady. Chief Raymond Adeyemi was a large man, not just in body but in presence, the kind of man who fills a room without trying. He shook Daisy's hand and looked at her carefully, the same way his son looked at things. "So you're the one who stopped," he said. "I am," Daisy said. "Why did you stop?" Daisy met his eyes. "Because he was sitting on a wall alone, and nobody else was going to ask if he was all right." Chief Adeyemi looked at his son, then back at Daisy. Then he smiled, slow, deep, the smile of a man whose long calculation has come out correct. "Good," he said simply. "That's the right answer." Madame Stella, David's mother, was smaller than her husband and sharper than everyone. She looked at Daisy the way jewelers look at stones, quickly, thoroughly, already knowing the result before they say it. "My son has never brought anyone home, not once in 30 years, she said. "I know," Daisy said. "Does that not frighten you?" "No," Daisy said.
It tells me he was waiting for something real. Madame Stella was quiet for a moment. Then, "Welcome to our family, Daisy." She slept in the guest room that night, the first time in years that she had slept in a house and felt welcome. Not tolerated, not ignored, not compared. Welcome. She woke at 6, old habit, and lay there in the soft morning light of a room that was not her room, in a house that was not her house, and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be.
The announcement came 3 weeks later. The Adeyemi family released a formal statement through their PR office, as they did with all significant family news. David Adeyemi, heir to Adeyemi Industries, was engaged. The woman's name was Daisy Johnson. Her picture, standing beside David in the Adeyemi garden, both of them lit by afternoon sun in a way that looked less like a photograph and more like evidence, was everywhere. The news app, the society pages, the community WhatsApp groups that Mama Agnes had been a member of for 11 years. Scene: the living room. Mama Agnes, Juliet, Daniel. Juliet saw it first. She had been scrolling, looking at nothing, when the notification appeared. She read the headline, read it again. Then she stood up so fast her chair fell back. "Mama!" Her voice, stripped of everything. No performance left, just sound. Mama Agnes looked up from her sewing. Juliet held out her phone. The headline: Adeyemi heir announces engagement to Daisy Johnson, the woman who showed me what kindness really means. Below it, the photo: Daisy, in the garden, smiling, with a man Juliet had spent 3 years planning to marry as their future daughter-in-law. Narrator: Mama Agnes cried. Not the dramatic crying of someone performing grief, the quiet crying of someone who was realized, fully, completely, too late, that they were wrong about something that mattered. "I threw her out," she said, to no one in particular, to the room, to the air. "I threw my own daughter out." But the story was not done. Because while Mama Agnes was sitting with her regret, 3 men in suits knocked on the door. From the mortgage company. Juliet's boyfriend Tom, the one with the illegal dealings, the one Mama Agnes had always looked away from, had disappeared, taking with him 50 million naira that Juliet had borrowed against the family house without telling anyone. The deadline had passed. The final warning had been ignored. The house, the big, comfortable house in the good neighborhood, the house that had been the entire foundation of Mama Agnes's pride, belonged to the bank. Juliet stood in the living room of the house she had grown up in and watched strangers walk through it with clipboards. She had spent years believing that wealth was something you married into, that kindness was weakness, that her sister was a fool. She stood there and understood for the first time the full cost of being wrong. The wedding was the largest event the city had seen in years. 3 weeks of preparation, guests from 4 countries, a venue that took 6 days to decorate. And Daisy, the girl who had been thrown out of her home with 1 bag, walked down that aisle in a gown that 6 seamstresses had spent 4 weeks making. Diamond tiara, pearl and gold embroidery, a train that whispered across the marble floor like something that had always been coming toward this moment. She was not nervous.
She had spent 26 years being invisible in rooms that should have seen her. She was done being invisible. After the ceremony, Daisy found them before she left. She hadn't planned it, but she turned almost at the door and saw them standing near the side exit, not approaching her, not calling out, just standing. The way people stand when they are waiting for something they don't think they deserve. Juliet stepped forward first. Daisy, just her name, all the performance gone, nothing left but the word, "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know I don't deserve. I'm sorry." Mama Agnes behind her, and Daisy could see it on her mother's face, the weight of 3 years of choices pressing down all at once. "My daughter, I was wrong. I was wrong about everything. I was wrong about him, wrong about you, wrong about what matters. If I could," her voice broke, "if I could take it back." Daisy looked at them both for a long moment. She thought about the door, the one bag, the street, the evening air. She thought about every dinner where she had been the invisible one, every morning she had left the house and nobody had said goodbye, every time she had been compared and found lacking and had quietly adjusted her life to take up less space. Then she stepped forward, and she hugged her mother. Not because everything was healed, not because everything was forgotten, but because she was free. Genuinely, completely, no longer waiting free. And free people can afford to be kind. "I forgive you, Mama," she said quietly. "Both of you." She pulled back, looked at them clearly. Then she turned, took David's hand, and walked out into the life she had always deserved. There is a kind of person the world consistently gets wrong. The one who stops when everyone else keeps walking. The one who gives when they can barely spare it. The one who sees a human being where others see an inconvenience. The world calls them naive. Their families call them foolish. People laugh at them, openly, comfortably, as if their kindness is a personal affront. And for a while, sometimes a long while, it really does look like the world is right. It looks like the kind people lose. It looks like the calculation doesn't work in their favor. It doesn't look that way forever. Daisy lost everything in 10 seconds of simple human decency. She stopped, she asked, she gave. In those 10 seconds, those ordinary, unremarkable, completely unperformed 10 seconds, gave her back more than she had ever had. Not just the wealth, the knowledge, the confirmation, written in the language of everything that followed, that she had always been right, that kindness is never foolishness, that the people who see you when you have nothing to offer are the only ones worth seeing by. This has been Fusion Narratives. If this story moved you, share it with one person today. Not for us, for them, because somewhere right now, there is someone who needs to be reminded that good people exist. Be that reminder.